Wow, that's bright. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Henley. I am the Dean of the College of Business and Public Administration here at the University of North Dakota. I'd like to thank all of you for coming to our 14th annual Olafson Ethics Symposium. This is a keynote event for the College of Business and Public Administration, and one that we are particularly proud of. The purpose of this Ethics Symposium is to provide a platform for students and our community to explore the importance of personal and professional ethics. And we have a very interesting topic tonight. We're talking about ethics in sports business. This event is made possible through the support of the UND College of Business and Public Administration alumnus Bob Olafson. Bob, if you want to, yeah. We are very grateful to Bob for his advocacy on behalf of the college, and particularly in the education of ethics. This is very close to Bob's heart and his experiences in his corporate world. We would also like to thank SEI Investments Company. Mark Morgan, are you here to be recognized? For their tremendous support of this event as well. I'd like to recognize a few special guests we have. President Mark Kennedy is here. And our First Lady, Debbie Kennedy. Our Provost, Tom DiLorenzo, was here. He may have had to step out. And we also have our CEO of our UND Alumni Association and Foundation, Deanna Carlson-Zink. So we're looking forward to a very interactive conversation tonight, and we invite you to join us in the conversation by tweeting your questions, make sure I got this hashtag right, at UNDBiz, B-I-Z-O-E-S, so UNDBIZOES. So you can tweet us your questions, and Mark and I will answer those as we're talking tonight. You can also utilize the various microphones in the audience if you have a question and you're here with us in person. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mark Chipman to come up with us. Mark is currently the executive chairman of the board of True North Sports and Entertainment Limited and the Winnipeg Jets Hockey Club. In addition, he serves as the governor of the Winnipeg Jets on the NHL's board of governors, as in chairman of the Winnipeg Jets True North Foundation. I know that's a cause that's particularly important to Mark's heart. While attending UND, he's one of ours, Mark lettered in varsity football, the best sport there is, while earning an honors BA in economics and a Juris Doctorate in law. He entered the business of professional hockey in 1996 through the acquisition and relocation of the International Hockey League's Minnesota Moose to Winnipeg, which he called home. Together with his business partner David Thompson, Mark led the team that developed the Bell MTS Place, Bell MTS Iceplex, and the acquisition and relocation of the NHL Atlanta Thrashers, which was probably a much better fit because coming from Atlanta, I don't think hockey was as interesting down there as it is up here. So I think that was a good move for you. So they were renamed the Winnipeg Jets by Mark at the 2011 NHL Draft. In addition to his business and hockey interests, Mark is a founding member of the Hockey Canada Foundation, established by the True North Youth Foundation in 1996, and founded Gonzaga Middle School in 2016. We are very honored to have you here tonight to talk about ethics in the sports business world.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to have just an interactive conversation about the idea of ethics and how it is played into sports in particular. So what do you think it means, Mark, first of all, to be ethical in professional sports?
Well, I don't think it's any different, to be ethical in professional sport than it is to be ethical in any aspect of your life. I think that as a society, we tend to hold up professional sport and professional athletes as some unique place, and it is in some respects. But you're just dealing with people, and that in our case that have are high performance athletes, and but they're people, and so I don't I sort of reject the notion that there ought to be a different ethical standard within sport. sport and professional sport is just an expression of our societal beliefs and how we want to spend our time, in our leisure hours, whether it's football, baseball, whatever. Mm-hmm. So ethics is ethics. It's doing the right thing. Sometimes I think, we're held to a higher standard, and perhaps we ought to be, because, whether our athletes like it or not, they're role models. Mm-hmm. So the very same principles guide what we do inside of the game of professional hockey that I grew up with, frankly, and the principles that I learned here and from the coaches I played for here. And in fact, I listened to Mike Berg tonight, who I had the pleasure of coaching for a couple of years at Central High School. They're the very same principles that guide me today and guide our organization. Very same.
And so you make an interesting point about it should extrapolate to other organizations, but oftentimes in sports business, we look at ethics differently. Do you think it's because of the money involved? Do you think it's because of the athletes? And as you mentioned, they may not necessarily want to be a role model, but they are, because you can't, I think you and I mentioned one time in a phone call, you said you can't choose whether or not you're a role model.
Yeah, I find it interesting that some athletes nowadays are saying, I'm a performer, I'm an athlete, I'm not a role model. I don't think that's a choice you get to make. I think we are all role models within the sphere that we operate and live within, and professional athletes, now more so than ever, particularly with the advent of social media, they're watched very carefully, and they're role models whether they like it or not. Perhaps, as I said, they're held to a different standard because of the income that they make, and I think there's just a hope that they're good people. When you love a game and you attach yourself to an athlete, you hope that they're a good person, right? And it's not just the God-given ability that they possess that draws you to them. That you hope. Like my hero growing up was Bobby Orr, and I hoped that he was a great guy. And when I found out that he was, it was really gratifying. But I suppose that's not always the case.
Sure.
But so I think there's this expectation that because you're such a good athlete that the balance of your characteristics match it. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. But as an organization, you can take steps to we get to choose who plays for us, and so and I think a lot of teams nowadays spend a lot of time and money making sure that the quality of person that they're recruiting is just as high, or at least matching their athletic ability.
I think that's a very interesting point that you make about the research on the character of the individual themselves, because is that where you see yourselves as an organization, where you're doing your due diligence and considering the ethics and morality and the character of that person, because you're making a tremendous investment in them and they're also representing your organization. And I know with the Jets that you're very particular and very deliberate and intentional about maintaining a culture of ethics and morality. So can you speak to that? I'm sure a lot of our student athletes would really be interested in what kind of things do you all look at when you're investigating that investment that you're about to make?
Well, first of all, I would say that, the same principle is going to apply when we're looking to hire somebody in the front office. We look for that perfect intersection of character and competence. I think all of us could relate to people that we've known in our lives that might have had superhuman ability, but they lack character, and they ultimately they fail, or vice versa. You can be the most wonderful person in the world, but if you lack the basic skills necessary to complete a task. So we apply that principle in hiring, and we absolutely apply it in recruiting. And for those who don't know how the National Hockey League works, there's a draft, an amateur draft, and those kids are drafted at age 18. And teams, particularly now in the modern era of this game, where there's a level playing field, and we all have a cap. There's a salary cap, so you can't buy a team with money. It put in 2000, from 2004 on, it put a real emphasis on drafting properly. If you fail in the draft, it's almost impossible to unwind. And when I say fail, I mean particularly in those early rounds and first, second rounds, and beyond. Actually, beyond throughout the draft, it's really difficult to recover from mistakes, both in terms of the skill that you're drafting, but also the quality of human being you're drafting. So, I don't know that we're unique. Maybe we are, but I can tell you that we have a larger than average amateur scouting team. And we tell parents, if you're good enough, we'll find you. If you're playing under a rock in Finland, we'll find you if you're good enough. And that, and so all the money and time that parents invest in their children's, their hockey careers, really doesn't matter. If you possess the skill, there's 31 teams in the NHL, all well-resourced. They're going to find the good players. It's finding the great players that possess, those real intangibles. And so, we go to great lengths. There was a discussion at dinner about following Twitter feeds. Like we did that. That's old news, doing that. Like, we have gone to, when there's a toss-up and we go through this lengthy ranking process every year to get our top 100. We're talking to their teachers. We're talking to their junior high school principals in some cases. If there's a question mark, there was on one kid that we were really high on, and there was an incident when he was 15, and it really, it caused a lot of doubt, but you do the right amount of investigation, and you find out that it was an unfair accusation, and the kid turned out to be a great kid. My point is, you can't make mistakes in this business. It's costly if you do. We're in the business of winning, whether you like it or not. We're measured every morning in the newspaper.
Sure.
And in our market, and it's a very it's an intense market. So when you're in the business of winning, you can't do that without selecting players and surrounding them with coaches and management and all kinds of other resources that understand the ethical line and what's right and what's wrong. It's that simple.
So what would be some of those red flags that might pop up that, a potential recruit or a potential draft choice might have in their back? I mean, I was thinking about the NFL draft last year and the quarterback out of Wyoming that was expected to go as the highest quarterback, and then a few days before the NFL draft, his old Twitter feed stuff came out from that when he was 15, 16 years old, and there were some inappropriate things that he had said on there. And, how far back do you go, or what do you look for? And the comment you made about, the one kid that there were question marks about, but how do they recover if they have made mistakes? And I know it's not a black and white issue.
Yeah,
it's not easy to say. But
yeah, we all make mistakes, and it's sometimes it's very difficult to hold a young man accountable for a mistake he might have made when he was 16 years old in a social media thread. So we have the opportunity to interview those kids, and as I said, speak to a lot of people who would know them well. So it's not there's no sort of death penalty in the process of making a mistake. We all make mistakes. It's a pattern of conduct that we're looking for, and I think the one trait that we look for, and it's hard to spot, but it's a quality of humility that we're looking for.
Okay.
And that might sound odd, given how competitive the game is, and how seemingly individualistic sometimes you have to be, or so self-interested that you appear to have to be in order to get to that level. But I think of the kids that are playing for us right now, and the ones that stand out in my mind are the most selfless ones. And there would have been a pattern of that conduct that we could have ascertained before we drafted them, or before we signed them as a free agent, that they were, quote, a good team member. And I think that it's not as easy to spot, but if you look hard enough, you can trace it. And to me, it can be a really defining quality.
That's a very interesting consideration to make, and especially when you're doing that background work, you have to think about how that individual can impact the team as a whole. So
Absolutely.
it's not just the mistakes or the questionable behavior they may have had and the impact it would have on the face of the organization, but also how's that going to transfer to the locker room and how are they going to interact with the existing players?
100%.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we have some questions here or no? Oh, that was saying. So talk about, if you can, with your particular organization, how you attempt to instill an ethical framework and culture into the organization as a whole. I know you're very interested and very active in giving back to the community and see that as an obligation of a sports team. So can you speak to that and the ethics behind that?
Yeah, I think, so the business of professional sport's a difficult one, and I don't mean that to evoke sympathy. I mean, I haven't met anybody yet who's felt sorry for anybody to get into this business. But it's a harsh, tough business on most days. It's a beautiful game, but it's a harsh business. One of the most gratifying aspects of it is it gives you a platform, an ability to affect some social change, right? And our community is not unlike any other. There seems to be a never-growing demand. The social service network in our community is strained, as I think it is in most communities across North America. There's never enough resource. So what our organization is able to do is to raise significant amounts of capital, and we do it somewhat uniquely. A lot of professional sport team foundations are pass-throughs where they'll raise money through various events and fundraising events and sale of 50/50 tickets, et cetera, and they give it away. We chose a different path, which was to create our own programs. We thought it made a whole bunch more sense in that I'm somewhat passionate about being able to quantify outcomes. Okay. So, we selected a need in our community that relates to youth that are underserved and in many, many ways. And we run 3 programs that we're very proud of, and we built an organization in and of itself to do that. And the outcomes are, as I said, they're quantifiable. And we work very, very specifically in the area of mental health, which is thankfully in recent years it's become destigmatized to a large extent. People are a lot more willing to talk about the subject of various mental health issues. So we've developed a program that's in 1,800 classrooms now, about 30,000 students, and it's scalable. And we built it with some great educators, and so we're excited about that. We run a hockey program that's not designed to build hockey players. It's just designed to get kids we start in the 2nd grade and it goes all the way to high school. It's just designed to get kids through school, and so that's the privilege of being in this business, so that you can take the passion that people have for our game and our sport and our brand, and they're prepared to invest in the programs that we develop. And I think that's been one of the most gratifying parts of being in it is we think we're making an impact, and it takes the edge off of the nastiness of this business. It really does.
I think that's a great example of how you're talking about the athletes and the athletic organizations potentially being role models, whether they want to or not. But if these athletes are out working in areas such as mental health, which could have been stigmatized prior to that, but if a kid who's struggling sees that and they see a hockey player that they identify with and see them talking about this through this platform, that's a very significant impact that your organization can be having. So
it is, and the genesis of our program was the death of a young man who played for us. And,
really?
Yeah, and
okay.
A young kid by the name of Rick Rippon, and he was an unlikely NHLer. He was a kid that had overachieved and turned out to be a great player, but had battled some very serious mental health issues for many years. And
wow.
A guy I work with every day, I would say, kept him alive.
Wow.
For an extended period of time, but ultimately we lost the battle, and it left a real mark on our organization. So we built this program absolutely, to honor his life, but we didn't want to just do some sort of flavor of the month, cut a check to some organization. We decided to invest in the subject in a real meaningful way, and so, as I said, we hired some educators who really understood the subject. We wrote this curricular resource and made it available to the public school system, and it was perhaps just good timing, but it just exploded because I think
That's wonderful.
society was ready, and the school system was ready to finally have a resource like that to help kids understand not only the feelings that they might have or be sorting through at that middle school, when they have the cognitive ability to finally or to start to understand those feelings, but to spot it in others.
Yeah.
And to be a support to others in those really tough, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how I got through junior high, high school or college for that matter, but those are tough years, and so that's where we've introduced it. We've gone upstream now, and we've got an early years program as well.
That's great.
Yeah, so those have been the gratifying parts about being in this business.
That's a great example, because if a middle school kid can see that there's no stigma attached to having conversations about it because someone he or she admires as a professional athlete is willing to talk about it and talk about it as being normal and just being something that you should embrace and understand about yourself and your friends and your colleagues, then that can make a tremendous impact.
Huge impact, and our players have been a huge part of it.
That's great.
So when you have a young player who's just an extraordinary athlete, but actually goes into classrooms and talks about those subjects. I mean, you can't be everywhere, so we do a lot of it. A lot of it's web-based and video-based, et cetera. But it's remarkable how committed a number of our players have been, and without asking, said, how can I help?
That's great.
Because they've had their own struggles in their own life. They've battled through some often, without any supports whatsoever. So we're fortunate, and we've got an incredible group of young men that play for us, and are a very selfless group and are a big part of the work we do in the city.
That's great. And that's probably not by accident, because of the investment you all make in looking at who you're going to draft and be a part of your team.
Yeah, I don't think it's coincidental. I mean,
Yeah.
and we don't get it right all the time, believe me.
Sure.
There's, we really don't, but we try, and I think I really believe most people in our business are trying to do the same thing. They really are.
Again, if you have questions, you want to tweet to us, make sure I get the hashtag correct, but you can tweet us at UNDBIZEOS. So I have questions that we can intersperse into our conversation. Let's talk about how we approach professional athletes, and even down to, obviously they became professional athletes after most likely many years of being highly successful. So they were probably treated as the superstar in their small town, in every class they were, and maybe allowed to skate by on some things, and or different sets of rules in those very formative years. So do you think that is a natural tendency to make it a bigger challenge, and then there's a lot of money thrown at these individuals, and they've already maybe not had the same rules as other people? Does that make it particularly problematic about needing to be intentional about the ethics that will be tolerated within an organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. The young men that are playing for us, or have been high performance athletes their whole life. They've been the best of the best, and it's a very, very, very narrow funnel that it takes to get through to play in the National Hockey League. I would say though that you can find great athletes that are great people, and mitigate the risk that comes from a sudden change of lifestyle that these kids experience. Most of them come from very modest families, small towns, and we get to know their parents well. But all of a sudden you go from playing at the University of Michigan or wherever. We just so happen to have 3 kids that played for Michigan, and by the way, that's been sort of a deliberate approach of ours. We've got we have drafted out of the U.S. college system a little bit more than others.
Okay.
The other side of the world is the junior hockey system in Canada. It produces great athletes as well, but there's been in our view, there's been a real improvement in over the past several years in NCAA hockey, and so we've got a young man from UND by the name of Tucker Pullman, who's the kind of kid we're talking about, who is really, really, really grounded. And not surprisingly, I knew his father, and you know, there was no surprises with Tucker. But still, and you know, a lot of these kids get to where they're at with us, and it's instant stardom, and there's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, you go from a small playing at a college to making many millions of dollars a year in a very short period of time. Used to be you had to play in the league for many, many years, get to free agency or the threat of it, and that's when you got paid. Now kids are getting paid at coming out of their entry-level deal, millions of dollars. And that's hard, that, you know, and a lot of time on your hands.
Yeah. That's a bad combination, right?
Yeah.
A lot of money and empty time.
Yeah, that and gaming. No joke. It's becoming a problem. But we had a kid miss practice. Yeah, I got to be careful how much detail I go into. But when you're playing, what's the name of the game that everybody's playing right now? Fortnite. And you're playing it all night and you miss practice. There's consequence for that.
Wow.
Wasn't the NHL team. It was on our American League team. But where was I going with all this?
Money and time.
Money and time. Yeah, money and time, not a good combination, and fame.
Yeah.
Right? So you hope that the lessons, you know, that those young men learned from their parents growing up ultimately prevail. And for the most part, they do. You know, we're not there to watch over them.
Sure.
We got a full-time security guy, and he's busy. But I call him the Maytag repairman now because I don't know if you remember that. I know we'll get that joke, but there was a time a few years ago where we had a guy on our team who didn't have the kind of characteristics that I'm talking about, and he kept our security guy going 24/7, right? So we traded him, and now we call him the Maytag repairman because, does anybody get that? You know the Maytag guy's got nothing to do. He's standing around. So our security's nickname, we call him Maytag now.
That's a good problem.
Yeah,
though,
okay.
it sounds like, yeah.
Sorry, that too many young people, they don't remember that commercial. Thanks for laughing up front, though. I appreciate it. So yeah, money, time, fame, dangerous combination.
Yeah.
But if you spend the time early on assessing the kid's character, you got a better chance than not in getting past those issues.
And since we're on a college campus, it's interesting. I always think about the dilemma of the amateur athlete before they get to you. And you and I talked a little bit about this in some of our conversations on the phone and such about, you know, do we pay athletes, college athletes? Do we? It just, you know, it gets into a lot of gray area, which ethics often is a gray area. I mean, I remember a Georgia running back a few years ago, Todd Gurley, who was suspended for 4 games for signing autographs and getting paid for signing them. And, you know, where's the ethics in that? And that, you know, other people were selling his autograph on his behalf, and so, but now he was paid, and he broke the rules, so he should have been suspended. But where is the role of that amateur athlete, particularly on a college campus? I mean, that's an interesting dilemma.
It's a very interesting one because not all college campuses or programs are the same. For, you know, you think of the big SEC schools, and you know where football and is such a potent source of income for the universities. You wonder about that, about whether or not athletes ought to be paid above and beyond having their scholarship covered or their education covered. But I just think, I don't know, that's a really dangerous line to cross for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're either amateur or you're pro. And I just can't imagine a world where U.S. colleges are become professional institutions. Just yeah, that doesn't connect for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. And then
It is.
when you know, if the college bookstore is selling that kid's jersey number, and then, you know, it's hard of where does the line, where is it established? But you're right, it's a slippery slope. If you start going down that, and then you've got the schools with the bigger donors and such, you would be able to afford paying their athletes more. It's, you know, where does it start and where does it stop?
Yeah, to me, the quid pro quo for that is, though, it ought to be you know, it's a privilege to play NCAA sport. You're getting your college paid for, and that's the trade. You've given up those call it intellectual property rights to your name and your number when you're getting your school
Yeah.
paid for, I would say.
Yeah. And so, my family was always big college athlete supporters, and my little boy is actually named after a college quarterback that I followed when I was a kid with my parents. We spent weekends going to college football games and such. So, and, my father was a big booster, and it was interesting how you get tied up and your identity becomes part of that team and that success. And my dad said to me one day that, there's people who don't know football's being played today, when we were particularly upset about a loss. But it's also a very interesting business framework. I had a friend who played at SMU during the times of the Pony Express and the scandal, and if they didn't get the Maytag, they probably also don't
No,
get.
they won't
in
get
the,
that.
In the early 80s, Southern Methodist University got the death penalty, which they didn't actually kill anyone, but their football program was put on hold for a couple of years because they were giving away so much stuff to their athletes, particularly their football players. And this friend of our family's, he was one of those, and he was a kid. He was the youngest of 8 with a single mom in a bad area of Dallas where he lived, and they walked in and they said, we'll give you $5,000 a month, we'll give your mom $5,000 a month. And this was 1980, which still is, a nice little bit of money now, but was definitely a lot of money back then. And we'll take you to this car lot, and you pick any car you want, as long as you sign with SMU. And so it's a very slippery slope when you start going down it. But there were so many people there who wanted to win, who were tired of Texas A&M and University of Texas winning, that they wanted to invest their money in SMU and have them actually be competitive in football. So when you've got a 17, 18-year-old kid who's never seen that kind of money before and sees a potential way to help out his family, where's the adult in that room that should be stepping in on their behalf? And that's
Right.
where it gets particularly troublesome to me.
Agreed.
So. We've got a couple questions. Austin Gibson asked, how does the Jets organization typically handle off-ice ethical issues with their players or other personnel?
Well, since we traded that one guy, we really haven't had many. But no, I would say we thought we had one. We just got back from playing in Finland last weekend, and there were a few days off after we got there before we played, and their version of TMZ contacted us and said, we got footage of one of your players
Wow.
after hours, knocking over, appeared to be intoxicated, knocking over some street signs, and what's your comment?
Okay.
So we said, well, let's see the video. And
Okay.
well, we're not going to show you the video. You have to trust this, and we
wow.
need a comment from you. So it kind of threw us into our playbook that we have for it. And as it turned out, it was just a complete fabrication. They didn't.
Really? There was no video?
There was no video.
Wow.
They posted a picture of a guy who looked like him but wasn't him. And but it caused us to open the playbook up, and it's pretty straightforward. You go right to the player, and we established at the beginning of the year. We reinforced with all the new kids that come in what the code of conduct is. It's nothing they haven't seen before, and it's about, you don't just represent yourself. You represent our organization. You represent our community, and we take that very, very seriously. And if you run afoul of it, there are going to be there are consequences. Even these are grown men,
Yeah.
and they make a lot of money, but they understand, they're playing for us. So we went to the player. It was kind of laughable. He said, with the way you can track what you're doing these days on your phone, like he said, I was asleep at 10 o'clock and I could show you, and he did. He was able to validate right away where he was and who he was with, and
Wow.
so we knew right away it was kind of a shakedown. And
Is that common?
No, not really.
They'll make something up like that?
Yeah, not really. There are lots of things that are alleged online.
Yeah.
In this dark era of social
Yeah.
media that we live in. I'm sure there's some redeeming qualities to all of it. I'm sure.
But that kid's asleep. Or
Yeah,
that
yeah,
young
and he
man's
was
asleep in his
terrified. The poor
room.
kid was terrified.
I
right?
bet, yeah.
It's because he's got the Maytag guy, our security guy's in
Yeah.
his face, and I'm right behind him, and our general manager's
Wow.
behind me, and our coach is ready to go, and
And he was asleep the whole
He
time.
was asleep the whole time. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is,
Wow.
we confront and in an open and non-threatening way, and just say, hey,
Yeah.
here's what we've been told, you know, what's your response, and a very mature response, and
That's great.
yeah.
It's great that it was, well, it's unfortunate that that would be fabricated and,
It's a nasty world out there.
wow.
It really is.
But if it had occurred, for example, even though in this case it didn't, what would be some of the types of consequences
Well, he
that
would-
those players would face?
He would have had to own up to it. He would have
Yeah.
had, he would have had to issue an apology on
Okay.
behalf of himself and us, at a minimum.
Okay.
That's where it would have started, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So speak to the idea of, you know, where do we draw the line, so to speak, between fandom and the rights that a person has, you know, that they may think they own that particular team or that university's team, or, you know, let's ethically, you know, what is the obligation on your part as administration of a professional team like that to the fans, and where the ethical line is there?
Well, I would say I've always been really uncomfortable with the term owner of a team. I
Okay.
think that, but for our fans, the team doesn't exist. So it's more of a stewardship. While you have like ownership in a legal,
Yeah.
technical way, you're really in a position of stewardship, right?
Yeah.
Because the team belongs to the fans,
Okay.
right? And if you lose sight of that, I think you're on a very slippery slope. If you think, you know, it's yours to do with whatever you want, that can get very dangerous, I think. And there's some great examples in many leagues, but I often think of, although it pains me to say it because I'm a Chicago Bear fan, and I'm sure there are lots of Viking fans here. I think of the Green Bay Packers and the impact that team has had in terms of, you know, it being community owned,
Yeah.
right? And so I think you just got to have that mindset that it's really not yours. You're steering it. You're the steward of
Okay.
it for a period of time, but the team belongs to the fans. Now, how does that relate, or what's the ethical standard that connects to that? I'm not sure. Other than, you know, you got to approach it in. I mean, you often got to make decisions that are, you know, that have ethical consequences, but I'm not sure how that really relates to the fact that other than you're trying to operate it within a framework that you think your fans expect, right? They expect you to behave in an ethical way. They expect your players to behave in an ethical way. I really believe that, even though I think players nowadays in some sports get away with the most outrageous things, like that incident in the NFL. You know, I'm still really scratching my head over that one. I don't like where the guy, I can't think of his name, plays for the New York Jets, and that scene in the end zone, you know. I mean, and if you know, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it was like
He did something tacky with the
what wasn't
ball,
tacky?
and then threw
It
it
wasn't
into the.
tacky. It was outrageous. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think of the guy I played for here.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll probably be accused of being really old school and misguided and out of date, but I remember him saying to us, if you ever have the privilege of scoring a touchdown for me, you better act like you've done it before, you know? It just put the fear of God in you.
That's a famous Bear Bryant quote, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Murph used it on us,
Yeah.
right? I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
cool. That was
Act
Bear
like you've
Bryant.
been there before.
Yeah. So, like that penetrates you. And now you got guys wiping their rear end with a football and throwing it in the stands. And I go, like, wow. So, you know, I just out of interest, I just looked that up almost just to validate that it actually happened. The first thing that comes up is the guy got an endorsement for it.
Really?
You know, if I'm running a team and one of our players does that, I'm not only acting, I think, on behalf of how I see the, you know, right and wrong. I think I would hope that the fans of our team would see it the same way. So it's not only like you're acting on, you know, on what you judge to be right and wrong, and not to be all high and mighty about this, but, you know, but to adhere to a moral standard, to a compass that you know is based on inarguable, time-tested, objective realities that govern success. But that's what your fans expect from your players and
Sure.
your organization. And, you know, that's that's the weight that you carry when you get into this, because it's not really your team. It belongs to the fans.
I think that's an important perspective to have, that sometimes others may not have that perspective. But you look at the NFL and at the domestic abuse policies and such, and how that's been a trigger point over the last several years. And sometimes fans will object to a certain player being benched or suspended for however many weeks because of a domestic abuse allegation or an actual incident. And so that's where, the idea of winning versus doing the right thing becomes especially critical in the decision-making process.
100%.
So,
Yeah.
I think we have another question from Kyle Cozier. Is your club taking any steps to prevent an
Ottawa Senators type situation.
The Uber video made public.
Anybody here not know what happened there? So there's some guys in an Uber recently. There's a video camera on, and a bunch of them start complaining about their coaches.
Wow.
And it's recorded. And talk about a myriad of ethical questions, right? Was it right for the driver to release that?
Sure.
Was it right for the media to take it and publicize it? Those are great questions in and of themselves. But are we doing anything to prevent our players from complaining about our coaches? Can't say that we are. Don't know how I could possibly do that.
Yeah.
I hope they're not complaining about our coaches, and if they are, I hope they're not doing it in an Uber with a camera
Maybe
with
a
a camera
lift.
running. That's a tough. Can you imagine that next practice?
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. Hey guys, didn't really mean it.
But I think
you guys are great. Yeah, I love our power play. Your PK is great. Yeah.
And I think that's, where it gets to helping them realize that they're always on stage. They're always being evaluated or looked at or scrutinized.
Right.
And so,
Well, it's kind of funny because in this age of everybody having a camera and a video camera in their pocket, you'd think you'd be a little bit more circumspect of what you're saying. I guess not in that case.
yeah. This is a great question from Ryan Gilbertson. Where do the rights of a player to speak out on social issues begin, and where do they end? So if they're a player for an organization, where do the individual perspectives override maybe their obligation to their company?
So on this one, I would use as an example our captain, Blake Wheeler,
Okay.
who I hold in very high regard, and even though he played for the Gophers, I think he's one of the finest captains in the league. He's a grown man. He's a smart guy, and got a family of 3, and he spoke out last year, which we didn't expect, but he didn't like something that the president was doing at the time, and it had to do with the whole Kaepernick situation. He was offended by what the way that was being managed, and he said so, and it drew a lot of attention. I think, first of all, Blake's American, and so I don't think anybody in our community expected it. It was just sort of out of the. And it drew a lot of attention to him. And there was some concern about that. I had zero concern about it. I took him aside and congratulated him. I thought that it took some strength to do that, and obviously, and he's like I said, he's a very intelligent young man, and it wasn't some silly off-the-cuff remark that he made. It was a thoughtful comment, and hey, I would never impede on one of our players' rights to voice their opinion on that type of matter. I really wouldn't.
But how impressive that would be for you to do that, for his teammates to see that, because there probably was some anxiety on his part of how his leadership would potentially react, but he felt it was more important to make a thoughtful comment or response, and how you responded to it then is demonstrative of the whole organization.
Yeah, and I didn't make a big deal out of it. I took him aside. I didn't want, make
Yeah.
a big scene in front of everybody. I just took him aside and said, hey, I really admire your courage for doing that.
Yeah. How did he respond when you
He was, he was appreciative. Like Blake's a very mature guy. He doesn't need me to pat him on the back. He knows who he is, and he's just a real solid, fine. He happens to be a great hockey player, but he's a really he's an equally as good person, and so it's not for me to in any way infringe on someone's God-given freedom of expression.
Yeah.
Particularly on a matter like that. Now, if somebody's chirping off in a really inappropriate way, I'm trying to remember the justice. I think it was Potter Stewart. It was when I was in law school here who had this definition. They were trying to define pornography or obscenity, and they went to the movie theater, right, to figure it out. And the guy said, "Okay, that's it. I'll know it when I see it," right? And so I've kind of used that standard in my life, like what's right and wrong in terms of what people, I think is to say, and when they're working with our environment, I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And what Blake did clearly passed the test of being not only appropriate but courageous.
So there is a lot of talk and a lot of speculation and observation of athletes and their rights currently, in the example that you're given. But do you think that's the biggest ethical dilemma in sports business right now, or is there something else that you see on the front lines being even more impactful?
I don't think it's the biggest one. I think it's a big one, and I think the NFL is finally maybe getting their head around it. I think they, I was really interested in the comments at dinner from Eric on the subject. I think the NFL's now taken an approach of trying to show some empathy and understanding of those views, and that's one of those inarguable principles I believe in. Is there are many, but empathy would be one.
Okay.
The extent to which you can really understand and somebody else's paradigm and how they see things will ultimately govern your ability, the strength of that relationship and what you can do together. I think the NFL got it wrong at first,
Okay.
but I think the extent that they try to empathize and understand that subject, they got a chance of resolving it properly. So I think it's an important issue, but I think there are many ethical issues that professional sports leagues are dealing with. I just, I think right off the top of my head and it's not unique to professional sport, but the amount of physical abuse, towards women, it seems to ebb and flow. Those are problematic every bit, if not, in many cases much more so challenging ethical issues than whether or not you feel it's right to take a knee.
Great. Do we have questions from the audience? We have some microphones. It's kind of hard to see. Any questions from Mark? It's hard to see you guys with these lights on. We have these really cool microphones going around that they'll throw to you or at you because they're little boxes. So hopefully not hurt anyone, but if there are questions. Okay.
So I asked this on Twitter too. Do you think tanking in sports is an ethical move? And if so, is there a more ethical way to go about it? Such as like the Rangers releasing a statement to the fans about how their next couple of years were going to go?
So that's a hard no for me. I think tanking is an absolute, that's an absolute wrong. And I'm glad you asked me that question because we had the chance to do that a few years ago. The year that we drafted Patrick Laine, second overall, we won. You can check this, I might be wrong, but I'm going to say 5 of our last 7. And we could have, we could have changed our lineup. We could have put a bunch of our young American League kids in the lineup and improved our chances in that lottery draft and ended up with Austin Matthews. We chose very specifically not to do that. I just, to me, that's one of those things, you know it when you see it. You can't, you're cheating your fans, and I know there's lots of arguments that can be made for this. You know, that maybe you're doing it for a greater good down the road. You play games to win games. It's that simple. And that would be a case of Blake as our captain taking control of our team down that stretch. And we had a really tough. We were close to making the playoffs. We were just out. We had to go to the West Coast. We played. It was like 4 games in 6 nights against good teams. We beat LA. We beat Anaheim. We beat San Jose, and we didn't have to. And it reduced our chances in that lottery draft. Now we still jumped to second, but we could have jumped to first if we'd have really, and we didn't. Now I'm not going to say that the team that ended up with the first overall pick tanked, because I don't know that they did, but their record down the stretch sure wasn't very good, and so yeah, I don't believe in it at all.
That's definitely an ethical question.
It's an ethical question. And it was never even, honest to God, it was never even considered. And I'm not saying this to appear to be, ethical. I'm just telling you, this business is about, for me, our underlying purpose. I hope you would get this answer from the people that I work with every day. Our purpose is to be a source of pride for our community. That's what we are trying to be, okay? We got a sense of that last year in the playoffs. We went pretty deep, and you could see it in our community. But you can't be a source of pride if you're cutting corners or, that statement that I hear too often, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Like that makes me really queasy. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
We have another Twitter question from David Stanford. From a fan's perspective, it seems, at least to a certain extent, that the ethical standard in the NHL is higher than in other sports, in particular the NFL. Do you agree with this? And if it is, why do you think this is true?
I don't know if I agree. Maybe it is. It's hard for me to answer this question and not appear to be being boastful about the players in our league and being, to the detriment of other leagues. I would say this, and I'm sorry if this sounds political. We just have the National Hockey League is made up of really good people. I don't know why that is. And whether it's better or not, I don't want to be on the record as saying, but I think we're very fortunate that the quality of young men that play the game in our league are really good people. And they come, like I said, they mostly come from modest upbringings and, and good families, and from small towns across the United States and Canada. And I would tell you, and the European kids that we have are just spectacular kids, and when you meet their parents, you understand why. So I think we live in a smaller fishbowl too, much smaller than the NFL, and maybe that's why there is some appearance. We're not nearly as scrutinized because we're just not a mainstream sport like the National Football League is.
Well, and if you set the standards for what the expectations of behavior are and see clearly what the rules are, then as those kids move up through middle and high school and they see this is what the expectation is. And so maybe that's part of it as well too. If this is those role models that we talked about, this is how they truly behave.
Yep.
How do you feel about this is from Emma, how do you feel about the stick to sports argument posed when athletes speak to social and political issues? So are they really, sometimes delegated to being only an athlete, and that their physical abilities are really the only thing that defines them?
No, I think that's just, I find that offensive, that people could, that's like, the shut up and sing, Dixie Chicks.
Yeah.
I hope people aren't too young to remember them here. I'm really but like that.
Well, that was when I was in college.
Yeah. I find, I find that notion offensive, that, Blake Wheeler's supposed to stick to sports just because he's a great athlete. He's not entitled to have an enlightened view on
Sure.
on politics. I mean, if that's true, then I probably shouldn't have any political views, right?
Right.
Same, just because we're in the business of sport,
Yeah,
or that's absurd.
yeah. Okay. Do we have other questions in the audience? Right here.
Yeah, over here. Hi.
Sorry, we can't see anything.
I liked your comments about how the teams belong to the fans, kind of.
Yes.
But when does that stop? When does it become too entitled and too much, similar to a situation that happened recently when the Patriots fan dumped a beer on Tyreek Hill? How would you guys handle that, and would you support the player's choice to continue with the police in that situation?
Yeah, I would be backing up our players there for sure. I mean, that's an extreme, I think, and that's honestly one of the most difficult parts of this business is balancing the fans' expectations. Like, I don't think you can back away from the fact that they really are what makes this whole thing go. People have got to buy tickets and to watch games, or it doesn't work. But it's unfortunately some people it becomes defining for them, and we deal with that in our city because it's such a small market. We're the smallest market by far in the NHL, and so you create this sense of, or you're trying to, right, be a source of pride. And when you get there, it's a beautiful thing, but then it can topple over when people, you don't want it to be, what defines them as a human being when they get up in the morning. Like, I know what it feels like to lose, and it's an awful feeling. Mike Berg was talking about it at dinner, just about what an incredible experience sport can be, that it teaches you, all of those incredible feelings of winning, but also the devastating feelings of losing. It pains me that our fans feel, like we got it. We'll carry that burden for you. Go to work. Like, it's going to be all right. We're gonna try hard next game. And we're gonna do our best. But that's concerning when fans get that emotionally invested. And I don't know how you put a tap on it.
Yeah.
I really don't. But it is challenging. And it is as beautiful as what the Packers have created all over these years. There's a downside to it too. And I've heard the stories of what happens in that town when things go bad, when they lose. It can be it can be ugly. And but I don't know how you put the governor on that. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, and how you control it, if you want the support up to an extent, but not to that extent.
Yeah,
of obsession.
I don't like the notion that the media often throws at us that our players are subject to whatever scrutiny they choose because they're making a lot of money. We chose to pay them the money.
Yeah.
They're human beings, and so if it comes to any type of unnecessary criticism or abuse, we would absolutely have the players back there for sure.
What if it was one of your fans who did it?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ethically, do you think, and you don't have to speak on this if you don't want to, but do you think professional athletes make too much money when you say we chose to pay them this much money?
I think I do. I think I think that it's unfortunate that games become so expensive to see.
Yeah.
It really is. It's but again, and I don't ascribe to Adam Smith's, theory of, or laissez-faire sort of mindset of economics. Like but it's a free market, right?
Yeah.
And so costs continue to escalate, and the game gets more and more expensive, and that's troublesome to me. It really is, because I know in our case, most of our season ticket holders share their tickets because they have to, right? It's prohibitively expensive for one family to have to be able to go to every game,
Yeah.
if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So, which provides actually a benefit to us because it really spreads our fan base out.
Sure.
And there's more and more people invested, but it's troubling. It really is how expensive it's become to watch an NHL game.
We had another question up here?
Is it on?
Yep.
I think so.
Yeah, so-
I tweeted this, so if it pops up, feel free to skip over it. But Mr. Chipman, you and your company True North were instrumental in bringing hockey back to Winnipeg. When you were going through the process of purchasing and relocating the Atlanta Thrashers, did you run into any ethical issues during that move?
Not in that particular transaction, but there were a lot of false starts leading up to it. It's a long story I won't bore you with, but we started the process actually in about 2007 of being sort of approved by the league to acquire a team, and it took a number of false starts to finally get to where we got to. In buying the team itself, no, it was a really straightforward commercial transaction. But there were a few steps along the way that were kind of eye-opening. We were fortunate to navigate around them. But it's a business, and it really is. As I said, it's a beautiful game, but it's a business, and it's harsh, and it's so you got to have your head up in this business. You really do, and fortunately, I've surrounded myself with a lot of really talented and smart people, and we rely upon one another a great deal, and we did in the transaction as well. And my father was still alive when we did it, and he was sort of the ultimate go-to guy for me when things would get a little a little squirrely, and your spider senses are tingling and something doesn't feel right. And if I didn't trust, if my own instincts weren't clear to me, I had the benefit of going to my dad, and he was always an incredible source of guidance to me. So thankfully, he was there for me, and sort of we were able to navigate through all the challenging parts.
Other questions?
I'm getting off easy here
I
tonight.
know.
This is great.
This is your chance to ask a question of an NHL executive.
Question over.
Okay?
So back to like with the gaming, I know like Vancouver banned it. Would you guys ever do that, or do you think that's like going into the personal like life of the players too much?
That's a great question. I think what you're referring to when you say gaming, you're talking about Call of Duty, or what they're playing now? Fortnite. Sorry, Fortnite. Yeah, so this is a tricky one, okay? So the Vancouver Canucks, they don't allow their players to do it anymore.
Oh, really?
And there are some really, I don't know if it's an ethical question, but there are some growing challenges with it. There's more and more research that's showing it can create some very addictive behavior. We got a couple of young guys on our team that are really good players. They're young, but they're good. They're really good kids, and they love the game. And so they got asked the question, what do you think about the Canucks banning this? And
Yeah.
and our players' response was because they had an awful year last year. They're looking for excuses. I don't know. He's a smart kid, right? And,
Yeah.
that's a good answer. I don't know. I'm going to be really honest with you and say I'm not. We're not looking at doing that right now. We would hope that those young men would. That we've told them they need to find a balance, and it is a little bit worrisome. But we're not at the point where we think it's got to be banned. I hope we never get to that point.
That's great. I think this is a great question for us to end on, because you're a UND graduate. I believe your wife is also a UND alum, correct? And you
And
have
my daughter
you
and
have-
soon-to-be other daughter is a little past halfway here as well.
That's wonderful. So we're very proud of our alumni such as yourself and your family. So what do you think best prepared you, what at UND best prepared you for your job today?
I would say, so I was just a really, really average football player, and I walked on here. I didn't, and it was really hard. It was a real challenging environment to come into, to play the level of football I played in high school, and then come in here and on a team that went 10-0, was a really good team and had a legendary coach. Like, I would say, more than anything, I just learned that I was humbled. I was really humbled. I think, when you come out of high school and you've had a certain level of success and you think that, it's just going to continue, I really got humbled. And I got humbled, I got humbled in law school. I got, like, honestly, the fact that I'm sitting here right now is mind-blowing. And I'm not saying this to be, sound overly modest here. I'm telling you, like, I would never have guessed this would have happened to me. This place humbled me, I guess it'd be the answer. I got, and I learned a lot of great lessons in humility here, that from coaches, and that I think this is where I learned, if you think it's about yourself and you can do something on your own and it's just about you, that's a road, and I see it time and time again. You go, when you think this world is about you and your individual wants and desires, and it's all, I get to say and do whatever I want, whenever I want, and that might offend some people nowadays, but I honestly believe it. I really got humbled here, and I'm so thankful, like, that I ended up going to school here. I can't even begin to tell you. It was other than marrying my wife, which wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone to school here. It was a singular best decision I made in my life, and I didn't even know what I was doing when I made the decision. Somebody was looking out for me to end up going to school here, and it was a defining decision in my life because of the incredible people that were here that embraced me and humbled me.
Well, I think that's a great point. It circles back to one of your first statements when you sat down about what you look for in members of your organization, and it's humility.
Yeah.
So I think that shows our students how important that is, and to learn that at an earlier stage in life, because it'll take you very far. But we're very proud that you are a UND alum, and that you are sitting here, and that you have done these things, and that your family is so connected, and you've sent your daughters back here too. So thank you for being an advocate for the university and for giving your time back to us and to our students. So,
It's really been my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.